The Daughters of Zelophehad. Hello and welcome to our podcast here at Wainfleet BIC, the Ignite Youth
That was
Podcast.
different. There
I
you
know.
go. There you go. Yeah.
I lost it.
Oh, really?
I found it again.
You found it. That's good that you found it.
Here we are. Welcome to the Ignite Youth Podcast.
Yes.
My name's Julie Adams. Wow,
We're a
what
little
happened
We're a
here?
little backwards today.
Okay.
That's okay.
We were going to record this several minutes ago, and then Wes had to take a phone call, which is totally great. It happens.
Yeah.
So anyway, I feel like we're behind.
Yep. Now we're, yep.
Not your fault, but maybe it's, my brain is still switching gears.
Oh, yes.
Back to podcast mode.
Podcast mode.
I'm in it. Are you in
Okay.
it?
I'm
Let's
good.
go.
Okay. I can just see the gears turning of like, okay, we're back in it now.
We're into it.
Yeah, that was a weird motion to do. I forgot we record this sometimes. But
That's great.
So we are in part 2 of our Women in the Bible series. It's actually our finale because it's just a 2-part series that we're doing. But for this episode, we are talking about the daughters of Zelophehad. Now, very not well known really at all.
No.
Like they're not mentioned very much in the Bible.
Just twice. Once, twice, twice.
Yeah, but about twice. And to be completely honest, not many people actually know who these people are. So the daughters of Zelophehad. Sorry, I'm going to mess up the name just because.
We've tried to. We're sounding it out. We're being very phonetic with our.
Yeah, it's not going good.
It's going great.
But the daughters of Zelophehad. So there's 5 of them.
Yep.
5 daughters. So you have. I'm going to try and pronounce the names as well.
Okay, sound it out,
I'm
Pastor
gonna do the
West.
easy
Sound
ones.
it
I'm
out.
going to do the easy ones first.
Yep.
You have Noah.
Noah.
So you have Noah, Hogla, Milcah, Tirzah, and Mahlah. So
Sounds good to me.
I hope so. But so you have these 5 daughters who lived. This was in the time of Moses, and so they lived very long time ago. But people see the interesting thing about Moses is we don't know necessarily when to actually date everything.
Yeah.
Most people put it to around 1400 BC.
Okay.
So, I mean, for us, that's over 3,000 years ago now. And so there's this huge time difference we have to understand when we're looking at the daughters of Zelophehad, because the context of what's going on in their society to our society, of course, is going to be very different.
Yeah.
And so, to begin, the society of our time is completely different to the society of their time. So their time, society was very patriarchal. Like it was like the men ran things, and anything that if a father was to die, things would get passed on to the son. And if a father was to die and didn't have any sons, nothing would be passed on to the daughters. It would just go to the next relative male.
Like a cousin or a
Exactly.
nephew or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the whole basis for the story of the daughters of Zelophehad, because the man named Zelophehad, with only having 5 daughters, never had a son. He dies actually, and this is before the Israelites are going to be entering the promised land. Yep. And so these 5 daughters are like, hold on, we're going to receive nothing. Like we've traveled all this way, we're going to get to the promised land and be like, well, there's no home for you. And so they bring their concern to this is what they did about. They brought their complaint to Moses and the other leaders, which is a huge thing. Yeah. The fact is that Moses, it wasn't this. I think sometimes we assume that, like, if we're talking about Moses, people who had actually been able to go talk to him have to be more higher up people.
Yes.
But no, people came to him who were just of the people.
Yeah.
These 5 daughters who, they're young women who, to be completely honest, in a patriarchal society, wouldn't have been viewed highly. They just wouldn't have. Yeah. But they get to talk to the leader of their whole nation. That's something that's crucial to this story, is that they are seen and respected. And so they bring their concerns and they say, look, this is not okay because we're going to receive nothing. And Moses wasn't like shut down. He didn't do any of that. He's like, oh,
it wasn't like too bad, so sad.
Let me actually go talk to God about this, because this is something that I see where you're coming from. Of course, let's figure this out. And of course,
which actually is really good of Moses.
It is.
It shows he had a lot of wisdom.
There's humility and there's wisdom there to say, I see your situation. let's actually fix it. Let's get this sorted out. And so Moses was convinced by the daughters of their argument of what's actually coming up. And so they modify the law to say that, if someone is born without any sons, they would pass on to the daughters. Like, this is a huge revolutionary thing. Yeah. Because let's be honest, the daughters of Zelophehad wouldn't have been the only ones. Like, no, not every single family is having a son. No. Like, you have 2 daughters.
I do. But I think, and I don't know why they only had 5. I was under the impression that they usually had a great number of children. Yes. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I think Asian society was.
I think not all of the children.
Well, let's be honest. You could go 200 years ago in Canadian society. People did the same thing.
Like even my grandmother had many siblings.
I would say it's
12.
I would say it's much more of a recent thing. Yeah. To have less children. That's not, and like if we were to look at the rest of human history, it's very abnormal actually. Yeah. And a lot of that comes from, healthcare developing and. Well, that's it, right? Because it used to be like you would have like 12 children and you would hope that like 8 of them made it to adulthood, right? Like. That's crazy to say. That's how it was. Yeah. So these daughters showed that, there's an importance to actually standing up and seeking justice and being part of this. I want to focus on their relationship a little bit. Okay. So one of the big relationships they have is with Moses, obviously. So these 5 daughters went before Moses with a legitimate concern. They asked, why their father's name should be removed from among his family because he had no sons. They asked, to receive their father's portion of land after he had died, since none sons were able to hit it. Like, I want to focus back on how Moses actually heard them and actually wanted to be able to speak with them. Yeah. This, society point of view, this was countercultural. And I think it's a very good example of God actually using people and saying, there's an importance to this, is that both men and women are equal. We hold a high value of this in our own church. Like if you come here on Sunday morning, you'll see Pastor Renee and Pastor Trevor co-lead pastors. Yep. And so this was an example of men don't have to be the only ones that go and bring complaints. Women can do it as well. And women can do a fine job of it as well, showing these legitimate concerns. Yeah. And showing that, one, they can be respected, they can be taken seriously. This, there was a lot of implications from this story for the Israelites and the Hebrew people. It was that it wasn't just men who could go and do all these things, but women could just as well do it. And so this makes a difference, and it shows a different outcome for women from this period onward. And no, we don't see it in society, obviously. This is not a well-known story. But I feel like if more people knew about the story, they'd be like, whoa, hold on. This actually shows a critical nature of...
I think that there are fewer women that are highlighted in the Bible, especially the Old Testament. Yeah. But there are some. I mean, even Miriam, like Moses' sister, she was, also a leader, recognized as a leader. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why we don't talk about it more. Yeah. Anyways,
there's so many women in the Bible that we could point to and turn to and say, look.
Sorry, I kicked the table.
Look at the amazing job. Like, look at God working through these people. Like, you can view it and see it, and it's something that's really important. And there's a few noteworthy things I want us to know just about the daughters of Zelophehad. First, God used these 5 women to emphasize the inheritance rights of women and establish justice for them in the law. Because at this point in time, there wasn't a lot of justice for women in necessarily the law. Yeah. But this kind of shifts things a little bit and says, no, there needs to be. Yeah. And God uses women in this way. Secondly, they responded to the problem appropriately. Sometimes when we get really, we want to make a change, sometimes we go in yelling and wanting to make a change.
Both barrels blazing, right? Like, exactly. You're just aggressive.
But they don't do this. They think it through, and they actually go to Moses and say, hey, we're concerned about this. We think this should actually be changed.
So, and I think that's probably the difference between they weren't reacting emotionally to this situation. They were using their head, I guess. Yeah. Maybe not so much, probably their heart too, but not so much. They weren't like, that's not fair, and you have to treat us fairly, and you have to. They weren't like demand. It doesn't sound to me like they were demanding. They're not demanding.
And the biggest thing is, it's a learning opportunity not just for women, but for guys, for men as well. This is an example of, because guys react to emotionally as well, and get hot-headed and react. And so this is something to actually learn of from both genders, because we're doing this women in the Bible study. This isn't just for women. This is for guys and girls to both learn from. And so the fact is they went and presented it in a respectful manner. I think is an example for all of us that when we want this justice to be achieved, when we want a change, to go about it in a respectful way. We don't need to go and yell and scream and make a huge noise of what it is, but rather there's ways to actually do this respectfully, in a way that actually be able to seen and heard, and to build a reputation of respect as well. And also, we've talked about this already, but the fact that they were allowed to access to Moses. They were not told they couldn't see, this importantly because they were young, or that because they were women, but rather...
Do we know how old they were?
They would have been like... Probably the oldest would have been like 30 and under. And so you have these young group of women who are taken seriously. And so it's something really important to show that for young people as well, they were taken seriously in this olden age, like 3,000 years ago, that in the last 3,000 years, we still need to take our young people seriously. We still need to actually hear them. And I would say the generation that we have now, and growing up in Canadian culture, is probably the most justice-oriented generation we have. They are fighting so many battles and want to make sure people are, well taken care of and supported, and just really, really like pumping this social justice, like constantly. They're a crazy group of people. But I love them because they just don't stop. Well,
it's the passion that we love, right?
Exactly. And for an example, I would say for today is these $5 did an amazing job, an example for how powerful and wisely women can handle. They can handle laws, they can handle violence. It showed that they can actually handle the case of what's actually going on. Because if we look back in society, all that was done by men. And I said, no, this showed women actually have a good sense and a good way to actually speak into these things. They should actually be a part of this as well. It showed that. I know in years go by, and we actually have someone who we did last week, Huldah, who's a prophetess. Someone who is higher up, who has a reputation, who is taken seriously. Part of that stems from these $5 legacy as well. And so there's a legacy that has continued on for women in the Israelite culture that I hope, we probably don't see it as much today, but in the Old Testament, we actually did see part of this actually coming to life and actually coming to be. And so I think for the example I want to do for all of us, the reason we wanted to do this 2-part series, for Huldah and through the daughters of Zelophehad, to show that men and women first are equal in the Bible, equal under God's eyes. Second, women can be pastors just as guys can. And thirdly is that there's a proper way to go about and do things. And it's something to learn from for both guys and girls, that to have a good reputation, to be someone who talks to God and has this relationship to God, because people are going to come to us and they're going to ask us questions. How do we respond is, I think we got to go back to God and say, God, help me in this situation. Help me with this.
That is a good example that Moses specifically in this case.
Moses does a good job, But Huldah does exactly the same thing when King Josiah comes to her. And so I think it shows a great example of not just one gender being higher than the other, but rather that we're equal in the eyes of God. And that's something I think in our society we struggle with. I think in our society the pendulum swings constantly all over the place, but rather that we are equal, and that's something that's super important that matters today.
Cool. Thanks, Pastor Wes. What have we got coming up next? What can we look forward to?
Well, we're doing a series called Known coming up next, and it's kind of going to lead us into the senior high retreat. That's going to be a huge highlight, and it's always a huge thing for us, and so I'm really excited for us to be able to go about this and do this.
Awesome. Thank you. If you'd like to get in touch with Pastor Wes, if you have any questions, you can reach him at wes@waynefleetbic.com. And my email address is julie@waynefleetbic.com. So thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to connecting with you next week. Have a great week.
Bye.